Hey folks, my name's Ed Trevors. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm an Anglican priest serving in the beautiful parish of St. Margaret of Scotland that sits on the ancestral and on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Gwe. Here in Canada today, we are celebrating Remembrance Day. This is a poem written by John McCrae, a Canadian doctor and officer who served in the First World War. He never came home. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Here in Canada, that is a poem that ever since going to school, we've had to learn and read. Now, I don't have the memory for recitation, I guess, but this past Sunday, one of the gentlemen in our congregation, he read Flanders Fields to us. And as it always does, it hits me kind of hard. It's this time of year is emotional for me. Both of my grandfathers served in the Second World War. And I think this time of year makes me think of them. Makes me miss them. They've both passed. But when this poem was read on Sunday, it was that line, take up the quarrel with the foe. Take up our quarrel with the foe. It grabbed me. Because I remember, as I said, we've been reading this poem since I was 6 years old. As a child, even as a young man, that line sort of, it was like a call to arms, right? Like, so when John McCrae wrote this poem, who was he talking about? Who was the foe? Was he talking about the Germans? You know, Canada was in a war against the Germans. Was he talking about the Germans, that we should take up that quarrel in order to be people of faith and integrity, in order to properly remember those who have passed, those who were killed? Is it enemies of the state that he's talking about? Any enemies of the nation, whether it's the Germans in the First World War, or the Germans and Japanese in the Second World War, or the Soviet Union after that, or China, Russia, or terrorism, or drug lords, whoever it is our government happens to tell us in that particular moment who the great threat to our democracy happens to be? Or is it something else? Is the foe someone else, something else? In James's letter in the Bible, chapter 4, James tells us, he says at chapter 4, verse 1, he says, why are you guys fighting? What is it that makes you fight? What is it that leads you to quarrel and arguing? He says it's your desire. It's the battle you fight with your desire. You desire something but can't have it. You covet something that someone else has, and so you're willing to fight over it, to kill for it, to destroy for it. I think this is a closer description. This is a better description of the foe we are all called to battle. The foe with whom we are to go to war with. It's not a person. It's not a people. It's not a nation. It's whatever leads us to do this kind of thing to another human being, to another group of people. Whatever leads us into this kind of conflict where we are willing to kill en masse another group of people, another community, another nationality or religion. Then what is it that leads us to that place? Well, it is how we covet what others have. It's how we're afraid of it's how we're afraid that they covet what we have and we'll come for it. It's our greed. It's our anger and fear, our insecurities. It's our lusts. It's our envy. It's whatever is in our heart that helps us to see other human beings as less than ourselves. Whatever it is that leads us to see other human beings as less than human. It's whatever is in our hearts, whatever thought, ideology, theology, politics, that leads us to believe that another human being needs to be destroyed, erased, killed, conquered. This is the foe. This is the foe we need to take up the quarrel with. This is the foe we need to be willing to do battle with all the time. And this foe is relentless. This foe never gives up. This foe has found a way of infiltrating the most pious of people, infiltrating the hearts of the most pious of people, infiltrating the temples and the sanctuaries of the most godly. None of us are immune to this foe. None of us are immune to the beautiful sounding words of this foe. Be on guard. Be on guard. Be watchful. Because this foe is always lurking. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray that together you and I would combat this foe. That if you see it in me, you'd be willing to tell me. If I see it in you, that I would be willing to tell you. That we would be willing to stand up and say, no. That we would be willing to point out when we see things like greed, when we see things like malice and anger, when we see things like envy and fear, when we recognize in ideologies and theologies and philosophies and political understandings things that will cause division amongst humanity, that we would be willing to stand up, to say something, to call it out. Amen. Pneumoltis.